Welcome, everyone. We are super excited this week. We have a special guest, and her name is Michelle Steiner. Hope I said that right. Welcome, Michelle. We are really happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Laurie and Taylor. I appreciate it.
So let's just share a little bit about who you are with our listeners.
Sure. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner, and I live in Pennsylvania with my husband and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. And I'm a disability writer and teacher's aide as well.
That's amazing. How did you end up doing that?
I ended up, a very long time ago. I was diagnosed when I had a learning disability. I was in kindergarten, and I just knew that I wanted to go and help other people. And throughout all my journey, throughout school, writing has always been healing for me. God really put that in my heart from a young age, that was one of the first things I was really good at, that he revealed, this is a gift that I've given to you. And I remember just knowing that I wanted to work with kids, and I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I started my blog a few years ago, and I didn't really want to share a whole lot about having a learning disability. But then my friend in my group really encouraged me. She goes, you really should talk about having a learning disability. And when I did that, it was just so healing for me. It was one of the ways God used to heal a lot of that pain that I had in my life with having one. And then the working with kids, I knew I always wanted to work with students. And I always wondered, well, how is God going to use this with having a disability? And through a lot of things, I don't want to give too much away, but what ended up happening was sometimes I'll have students now that will have disabilities, and God has used that to be able to be that voice to just to say, see, you can do this. I've done this, and it's okay. And he's just used so many situations to turn that into purpose.
Wow. God is beautiful.
Yeah.
And as I say, it never ceases to amaze me how things we look at or view as something that's less than in us, he's like, no, that's how you're going to shine me the most, is that thing that you're thinking is taking pieces of you away is actually how they're finding me. It's amazing how he does those things.
Oh, exactly. Because I remember being, from the time I was a young child, I was lucky to be diagnosed with having one early, but I remember being really frustrated. And I thought, how could any good come out of this situation? And God was always a part of that story. Even from the time I was really young, I grew up Catholic. My parents put a very emphasis on God, and it was in there. But I decided throughout, like with my faith journey, I began to want more of a relationship, and that was the thing that I definitely wanted. And my parents, thankfully, are very supportive of not me not being in the Catholic Church. They're like, we just want you to go to church and find, and find that way. And I was introduced to people that really brought forth that God did love me and had that relationship. And that made all the difference in my life. And just being able to see that and taking that and saying, God, there's that pain. Why did this happen? What good can you make out of the situation? And I just get to see those broken pieces just being put together every day in my life.
It's beautiful.
Wow. Yeah. So, Michelle, can you tell us like a little bit about the learning disability, and at that age when you were young, you said you were young when you were diagnosed, like what that looked like for you around that age, and some of the things you've had to overcome over the years.
Sure. I was diagnosed, as I said, when I was in kindergarten. The first thing that my teachers noticed was I wasn't just wasn't able to do what a lot of the other kids were doing. Math has always been the biggest part of it with having dyscalculia. Counting was hard. Visual perception was difficult. I can remember I wasn't able to bounce a ball like the other students. And I can also recall getting these worksheets back, and they would be dot to dot ones. And I thought, oh, I'm doing these right. And the teacher would be like, no, you didn't do it correctly. And just my reading comprehension was off. And so my teachers noticed a lot that what was going on. So they suggested that I get evaluated for having one. And I had to repeat kindergarten the following year in a different school. And I began to receive disability support services from a very young age. I had learning support in the morning where we did reading and math, and I hand coordination. And I also had speech therapy because my ears were really clogged when I was young, so I wasn't hearing words correctly. So I had speech therapy, and I ate lunch with my first grade class. It was really confusing. And then kindergarten, I had time where we go into kindergarten. So it was really confusing on picture day because I had a first grade class and I had a kindergarten class as well. And the photographer didn't know what was going on. And we got our yearbook back and the students were all wondering why. But I was really lucky that what they were doing was helping, because the following year I was in a first grade room and I also had learning support. And they started to put me in regular ed classes for things I could do because they noticed you're a really good reader. You may not be able to remember what you read, but you have inflection in your voice and you're able to do that. And I was in reading, regular ed reading, along with having learning support reading. And I also science and social studies were all regular ed. And I had accommodations like with having extended test time and having the test read aloud to me. And those things made all the difference in the world. Math, I never got out of learning support math, but the thing that was really hard at that age was just wondering, well, what do I want to do in the future? Because I knew that I wanted to go to college, but a lot of people didn't think that I could do that. And with that planning, I even had a learning support teacher that told me, well, we don't think that you can go to college, and suggested a trade school. And socially, it also was really hard too. When I was young, it was people didn't want to go and be my friend when I was in school, and they didn't think that I was smart. And most of my learning support peers, they had more difficulty in reading, where I had a lot more in math. So that was really hard to find that identity. And then I go into regular ed and they lump me in with the learning support kids, and that was hard as well. So school for those years was really a struggle socially and academically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of feel you because I also was told in high school that I wasn't smart enough to go to college.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, there are people in education that maybe shouldn't be in education because it takes a really big heart and it takes compassion. It takes his grace and glory to do what teachers are called to do, because I used to be a teacher and my heart was just overflowing for these kids. But, in some aspects, you're limited on what you're able to do in the classroom. But I'm glad that you have a story that you did get the support that you were needing to help.
Yes.
So that is definitely a God thing. He put those people and put you in the right spot at the right time to get all of that at a young age. So that's amazing.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely that I had the right support, because during that time, we really didn't diagnose. I mean, they were doing a better job of providing services and diagnosing, but still there was a lot of kids that fell through the cracks.
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't have had those services, I wouldn't have been able to go on to college. And there was people that even thought, professionals that thought, well, you can go to community college, but based on your scores, I had a psychiatrist that told me, you're not going to go beyond that. But God had another way. God had what he wanted in my life. And I think I was the hardest person to convince that this was going to happen. And I had, even when I got to college, people said, we're going to have limited job choices. And there was still that stigma that surrounded the accommodations. And when I didn't use them, that's when my scores, my grades really plummeted. But finally God put a wonderful professor in my life that said, well, why don't we at least get you extended test time? And once I did that, I was able to get the associate's degree in early childhood, and I wanted to move on. I definitely always wanted to get my bachelor's, but I was able to move out on my own because I can't drive because of visual perception. And I had this this opportunity, it came as a blessing in disguise, because I remember being in my early 20s in some really bad relationships and wondering, well, okay, God, I'm single, where are you at in all this? And for financial reasons, I had to move back in with my mom and dad, and my job downsized, and I thought, this is the time to go back to school. And I also prayed this prayer after this one relationship. I said, God, don't send me anybody until it's the right person. And God fulfilled both of those, surprisingly. He sent me my now husband. We'll be married for 8 years. And I didn't plan meeting him at all. We just met each other, and I just prayed about that. And I was also able to get my bachelor's degree. And that was something that I didn't think I could do either.
I have chills from my head to my toes right now. It's so awesome. So when did you really, so you're saying that time frame was really in your early 20s. Would you say that that's when you started to pursue God, like on your own? Because you said you kind of went away from your parents, their church and all that.
Right. Because when I moved out on my own, I wasn't going to my parents' church. I found a church that was nearby. I mean, I don't attend that one anymore, but I mean, we have another one that we go to. But I just started really being independent. This was my faith. This was where I wanted to go, and I could take myself there. And even after I moved back in with my parents, they were the ones that were taking me to church in the morning, to the one that I wanted to go to, and they supported that decision.
Wow. Incredible.
I just want to say to anyone that's listening, never allow someone else's words to become your truth.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle and I both sitting here telling us that we were told we weren't smart enough for college or we wouldn't be able to do it. And yet we did it. We have God in us, which means we have all knowledge, all wisdom, all of his attributes living inside of you. So never let someone else tell you what you can and cannot do, because you, at the end of the day, you and God get to decide where you're going. And that's it. You don't have to listen to anyone else tell you that you're not going to succeed or you can't, because you can and you will.
Right. Yeah. He makes nothing out of something, or he makes something out of nothing. Wow. So sorry. I totally did that opposite. He makes
or did you though? Because all of those lies that we're told, he'll take that nothingness that they're telling you are and make you something.
Yeah.
You gotta take that something that they're trying to say you are and make it nothing,
Make
because
it mean
they're
nothing.
yes.
I guess it could be either.
Yes.
There we go.
Right.
He cancels it. He cancels it in the name of Jesus. And that's what's so awesome about God. Like, and your story is so inspiring, Michelle, because I mean, learning disabilities are not like, they're not uncommon.
Right.
There's all different types and varieties. Where, and we're just shoved into this box. And you think about in grade school, like they shove you in all these brackets and all these boxes, like, oh, well, if you don't fit in with this group, then looks like you're with this group. And, it could be a group that's way more declined in a sense than you are, right? So it's like, where do you fit in that? And I just love how in your story, like it's just such an overcoming story, because God, he has the victory. He holds the victory, and his truth prevails. And we're gonna always have the naysayers and the haters. And Jesus said they hated him first, right? And our flesh just has this desire, or this natural sense to where we only think like in this logical sense, to our own perception, our own way, like, oh, well, they missed the mark in these areas, so it looks like that's going to be their future. It's like, that's so not true. It's so not true. And there's people that prove it wrong time and time again with the strength and the power of God. So tell us a little bit more about, you finished your bachelor's degree and you're growing this relationship with God. Where were you at that point then, after you finished your bachelor's?
After I finished my bachelor's degree, it took a while to find the right job for me. I wanted to move back out again. That was the thing that I knew that I wanted to do for my parents and have that independence. So that I worked at some jobs, and it took a while to really find the one that I'm at now to work with kids that have disabilities. So that was one thing. And during that time, I also married my husband. And so we were, busy with, all that, and and then I didn't write about having a disability. I didn't take my friend up on her advice until just a few years ago. And I was really hesitant, really nervous about, oh, should I publish this? And I finally thought, it's just time to do this. And when I sent that out to the Mighty, and they said, I got that email that said, we're publishing your article about having limited hand dexterity. And that was just the most freeing thing that I've ever done. And I got a lot of connection with other people about that. And the hand dexterity is not something we even found out until I was an adult. I thought that I was going to go back to grad school and become a rehab counselor. And in order to do that, to get extended test time, I had to go back and prove once again that I had a learning disability. And years later, they're like, well, you have limited hand dexterity. And I was like, all of a sudden, everything made sense. It wasn't meant to be for me to go back to school. God had other ways that he wanted to use me. And but it was amazing that I just got another revelation of, oh, this is another part of your disability. And just to watch God put that once again into something good was amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that's so good. Can you share a little bit more about your writing and like what that looks like today?
Sure. I write about having a learning disability on my blog, but I put it in metaphors that people can understand. So nature is a big inspiration for me. So a lot of times I'll write about the life of having a learning disability. It's like it's a flower that's blooming, and they go into the different parts that maybe people don't understand, or all connected towards nature. One of the recent ones is about having a river with having a learning disability. And I get that chance to just explain it to people to be able to understand. And another part that I do is photography. God also opened up something else with that too. People will say, you really are able to bring out details in a flower that I miss. And I will post a lot of photography on my blog, and I've had it published in other places. And that turned out to be something that was a blessing too, because oftentimes I'll be in the car with my husband and I'll say, did you see that? And he'll be, of course, paying attention to the road, but I found something that I would have missed if I was in the driver's seat. And that's just, and then I get a chance to go back and take that picture. And yeah.
Wow.
I love what you just said about
Laurie.
Am I back? I'm sorry, I hit my button. Who puts an on-off button on the side of a laptop? It's not a good spot. I accidentally bumped it because I wanted to write down what you just said. And now if I can remember it, Satan didn't want me to remember, but I'm going to remember. How did you say that? Oh, if I would have been in the driver's seat, I would have missed it. I want to highlight that because when we try to take over in the driving seat of our lives, we miss so much. But when we let God be in the driver's seat, that's when we see everything. I just had to point that out. I got so excited. I hit the on-off button.
No, you're right. Yeah, because sometimes we want to take control over that, and we would just miss out on so many opportunities.
So many, yeah, and we miss what he's doing in the right now. I recently had a revelation of that. A few weeks back, I was just thinking about like the next season of my life, and like, it's good to think about that, right? It's good to have that in mind. But I'm like thinking about it, talking about it, and he convicted me, and he was like, why are you missing right now? Like, why are you missing out on right now? Like, look at what you have right now. Look at where you're at right now. Look at our relationship right now and dwell in that and be content with that. But we can have hope for the future, of course. And as we grow our intimacy with God, he really teaches us the priorities and how to really perceive everything in our life that honors and glorifies him. and honors and glorifies our life that he gifted us, So
Right.
it really is incredible. And I need to write that down because that was a really good point, Laurie. Well, starting with Michelle, then Laurie.
Yep.
Yeah.
The magic of the spirit moving.
It is.
Right. Yes.
That's so funny. I know. I'm so like, it's funny that my computer, I got so excited that I hit the button. Yeah. Because I'm like, whoa, I got to highlight that. That was powerful. It was so powerful. And so I encourage all of the listeners to get out of the driver's seat, start sitting in the now. Because it's so easy to focus on all the things we don't have. Start focusing on the things that you do have. Because the more that you focus on the gifts and the talents that God has given you, that's how he starts to highlight it. Because we cannot be shaped and formed and refined in the things we do not give God and place in his hands and let go of. So we are
Right.
beautiful masterpieces, but we have to allow him to shape us and refine us.
And also not focusing just on the struggle or the hard time, or, in Michelle's case, the learning disability, right? In someone else's case, it might be some other issue, right? That you're focusing on, you're looking at it as your debilitator. Like this, I cannot move forward because of this, right? We all have that. We've all had that at some point in our life. And so God is asking us to take our eyes off of that and move our focus to him, shift our focus to him. And we can do unimaginable things. Clearly. I mean, we can, it's possible. God can do anything and everything. And so we just have to shift our focus. So Michelle, with that in mind, what is something that you would like to share around that subject to the listeners about, in your case, how you really shifted your focus and you no longer were in bondage to this disability,
I think I began to be a lot more content. I just learned that God can work through a lot of these situations. And it was what he wanted and submitting to what God wanted in my life, and not just saying, okay, I'm only going to be happy if you give me this. Kind of like not looking at God like, well, you're this genie. It's looking at him as he's my loving father. And if he tells me no, that I can't have something, then there's a good reason behind it. And there's something that's so much better that I can't even see. And it was learning to just give that to control and to give that over to him, and just to let him turn into what he wanted it to be. And it was always a better idea than I had in the first place, but it was just that surrender and giving it to him.
Yeah, surrender. That's the key word. That's been like my life word lately.
Me too.
Like surrender. Like
Yeah.
we just need to surrender with every area of our life.
Yeah, exactly. And just see how, surrender that, and just to see that he helps me through everything. There can be situations that can be hard, even with a lot of the students that I work with. And I'll go in right before the class and I'll say, even if it's a good one, I'll say, can you go in here with me? Can you handle this? Because I can't do it on my own. And then I just get to watch what he's turned that into. And it's always beautiful.
Wow. I love that. I also want to highlight too, when he said about his quiet no, like when he tells us no, he's got something better. So I felt him say to me, so when we listen to his quiet no, because it's never like a no, it's a no. When we listen to the quiet no, then we'll be able to hear his giant yes.
I like that. Yeah, exactly.
He's speaking today.
Yeah.
So I don't know about any of you, but I want his giant yes. I want
Exactly.
that's what I want. Yeah.
Yep, of course. And there's been times where I've asked. I can remember there was a really difficult situation I was having with a student. It wasn't even they weren't misbehaving, but they wanted me to ask them for help on something, and I couldn't help them. And there was somebody else and I was thinking, God, why are you putting me in this situation? Because all the kids know that I work with, that I can't help them with math. And somebody asked me for help where I couldn't do it. And I said, okay, so why am I in this situation? Why can't I help them? And before I know it, there's another student that comes up and they needed help on something I could do, and I could read a test to them, and or they needed help with an assignment I could work on. And God said, see, I brought you to this moment because you could do that. And you're able to explain to them why there's certain things you can't do. But this is why I brought you to this moment. I placed you here for a reason and a purpose.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It brings great humility to us also,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, we all have our weaknesses in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we weren't meant to do it all. Like, that's what the
Yeah.
church is for, right? Like,
Right.
someone's the arm, someone's the finger, someone's the leg, right? And we kind of work as a team. We are the bride, the church, to
Right.
fulfill his purpose. So it's not like I'm just the mighty church by myself and I can do
No.
it all. You know, it's his spirit working through all of us. And so what great humility it brings to us when he does address, you know, a weakened area like that. And whenever you watch that
Mm-hmm.
he shifted your focus from the issue, from the weakness to his strength. And he's like, here, help this student with this. You've got this.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and it's just inspiring too for the students. And just again, back to that humility aspect. I think that it shows, like, when you look at a family dynamic, I think that when children see their parents as, like, when they can see their weekend and the parents can express that,
Mm-hmm.
it almost strengthens the bond, because it's like, oh wow, it kind of brings a little bit of relatability. Like, my parent or my mom or dad, like, they do fall short sometimes, they don't understand it all sometimes, and it glorifies God in that, because they're not looking as their mom and dad as the superhero in every story. They're looking to God as a superhero in every story.
Exactly. And that was always something that I wondered with working with kids. Well, I don't have all the answers. How was I going to do this? And I had a friend that told me, oh, you shouldn't feel that. You shouldn't be so humble or something. If I was working with kids, I would want to be a God, like I knew everything. And I just remember thinking, if I was God, I would be a terrible God. It just wouldn't work out that way. And there's so much beauty in that humility, though, that comes forward with that, because I can tell them that there are things that I struggle with. I'm not perfect. I don't have everything together. And sometimes whenever things do occur, I do apologize to my students. And a teenager looking at you like, why is she saying she's sorry for doing this? But I think that's modeling behavior that I want to see in them too, that I want to see
Yep.
that they're able to do that, and how we make relationships right is a big thing. And also being able to advocate is important too, because a lot of my students have disabilities and their disability isn't going anywhere. And listening to them at 7th grade is like listening to a recording myself. I wish I didn't have a learning disability. I wish I didn't have this. Or I need help with something and I'm afraid to ask. And I get to tell them, well, this is how we do this. And I've taken some students who are really afraid to go up to somebody and ask for help, to be able to walk them through how they do that. And that's just very rewarding.
Yeah.
I think the best teachers are the honest teachers.
Yeah.
Because as a teacher, what I learned really fast, kids know when you're full of crud. They
Mm-hmm.
know
Yeah.
when you're trying to pull a fast one. They know when you're
Yeah.
not being completely honest. They know. They know. So
Exactly.
I always told them all the time, like, I'm a horrible speller. And I really didn't like history. So when they would have those kind of questions, I'm like, you should probably get a dictionary, because you could either A, spell it the way I spell it, or you could spell it correctly. Your choice, your option. Yeah. So I would definitely, look that up. I always let them know, because we're not meant to know everything. We're not
Right.
meant to do everything. And just encouraging them that there's something special inside of you, whether you can
Mm-hmm.
spell, whether you
Right.
like history. Yeah.
And that's funny because they usually put me for history and spelling and English. And then thankfully the people I work with, they're better at math than I am. So they like having me in the room because I'm able to help in that way. Yeah, we all help each other out, and that's true. And that's one of the nicest things, is when also I get to look at them. And when we do spelling words at the beginning of the week, they don't know a whole lot of them, and they're kind of sad about, oh, I'm scared. How am I going to do this? And usually by Friday, they'll come back and say, I got an 8 out of 10 on the test. And I get to say, okay, see, this process works.
Yeah. I think another thing that this just highlights is, like, the importance of like not being afraid to ask for help and
Mhm.
to be okay with help. Because I mean, when I was younger, I had a speech impediment. I went to speech
Mhm.
therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was hard. Like, I just remember feeling like an outcast, right? Because I'm the
Mhm.
only student with like maybe two others that leave the class and go
Mhm.
to the speech therapy class and the tutoring. Um, and I just remember it being hard, but then I look back at it and it's like, but if I hadn't had that help, where would my speech be now, right? Like,
Right.
and who would have known in God's wondrous ways that now I use my voice to share his glory, like as part of a ministry. So we don't know, like I said,
Mhm.
he will make something out of nothing. Something that I thought would hold me back was the speech impediment
Mhm.
he's now using for his glory. And it all came from the humility of like, hey, get some help, right? Go to
Right.
someone and get the guidance, get the counsel. No matter what it is you're walking through, get help. Like, if you're feeling like this is too big for you, go find someone that can help you and guide you, lead you closer to God in the process. Because whenever we isolate like that, we are in just such a vulnerable position for spiritual attack, really, too, because now you
Mhm.
start feeling all these feelings about yourself, all these insecurities start to develop, and you're just sitting with it and you don't want to speak about it. You don't want to talk about it with people, but
Right.
we have to get the help to overcome. And I just see that written all throughout your story, Michelle, is all those years of like getting the help. And even when you felt like, oh, I don't really want to get this help, but just getting the help is what helped you to overcome so many obstacles that everyone else told you you'd never be able to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, being able to go out there and getting those services and getting that help. And that was hard for my parents too, especially when I was younger, because they're like, okay, you got to go to school. And there'd be days that I'd be like, I would go, but I knew that I was going to take a test and I wasn't going to do well, or I knew that I was going to get a report card and maybe it wouldn't have the best grades. But my parents said, no, you got to go and you got to follow what they do. We just expect you to try. And yeah, I would just encourage people to get those and to use the services and to use that help, because that's what it's there for. When I went back to university, if I didn't use those support services of having a note taker and extended test time, I wouldn't have been able to make Dean's List for a semester or get my bachelor's degree. And I just think that that's so important that people do seek that help and do what works. Do what works.
Yeah. And everybody's journey is different. And I think that's really what it
Mhm.
highlights is it's
Yeah.
customized, right? God
Right.
really designed each of us for a unique purpose,
Right.
specialized for you. And so that means it's not cookie cutter. That means everyone's process is customizable. And when we just follow his plan and his way, he's going
Mhm.
to customize it, and he's going to do things that are unimaginable to some people. They're like, why are you doing it that way? It's like, you just wait.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So, I think that's just brilliant. That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share for the listeners last minute that's just on your heart, Michelle?
What I would just love to tell people is to just give that to God, whatever they're struggling with. And you can have success in it. And it may not come in the package that you imagine, but if you give it to God, He'll give you something even greater.
Amen. Love that.
Amen. That is a great way to end.
Good.
Better package. We're gonna get that big yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think I'm
Yeah.
gonna call this episode "Big Yes." The big yes.
I love that.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. We have enjoyed every minute of this episode. I've learned so much. I'm like super inspired right now, honestly. And it's just been such a joy having you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.